Good evening, and thank you for attending. My name is Denise McKelvey, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's candidate debate. Before we begin, please silence all phones and electronic devices. Additionally, please refrain from any interruptions to the debate, as it is being recorded for on-demand viewing and post-captioning services. The Citizens Clean Election Commission is the sponsor for this evening's event. The Clean Elections Act is a campaign finance reform and public education measure initiated by Arizona citizens and passed by voters in 1998. The Clean Elections Act was created to allow campaigns to be more issue-oriented and less negative. The system provides full funding for qualified candidates who participate voluntarily. The candidates agree to abide by the Clean Elections Acts and rules, which include contribution and spending limits, foregoing special interest money, as well as participating in commission debates. The candidates invited to participate tonight are in contested primaries. Candidates in uncontested primaries are not included in the debate process. For tonight's debates, questions have been prepared by Clean Elections based on a voter survey, as well as questions that have been submitted by voters through the Clean Elections smartphone app. However, we encourage live audience questions, so if you have questions, please print them clearly on the note cards given to you when you walked in and hold it up. One of our volunteers will pick up the cards and deliver them to me. If you need additional cards, just raise your hand. We screen the questions for clarity to eliminate duplications, speeches, or personal attacks on candidates. The debate is scheduled for 1 hour, so we may not get to all audience questions, but we'll do our best. There's an independent timer who will see to it that all the candidates have their allotted time to answer questions and will tell them when their time is up. Tonight's debate includes opening statements, 1 minute each. Then we'll move on to a quick icebreaker called a lightning round of this or that. The first half of the debate begins with 2 minutes to answer audience questions. Each candidate will answer the same audience question, and we will rotate which candidate responds first. After all candidates have responded to the question, the first responding candidate will be given an additional 30 seconds to respond. The second half allows for candidate-specific questions with 1 minute to answer each. So if you have a question for a specific candidate, please include the candidate's name on the note card. It will be considered during the second half of the debate. Then lastly, we'll end with 1 minute for closing statements. Again, we ask that you remain polite to all the candidates and give them a fair and uninterrupted hearing, no matter how strongly you may agree or disagree with anything being said. We will now introduce our candidates. Mr. Randall Friese, traditional candidate, Democrat, running for state representative. Mr. Matt Kopec, traditional candidate, Democrat, running for state representative. And Ms. Pamela Hannley, Clean Elections candidate, Democrat, running for the state representative. Let's give them a hand. The order in which the candidates will speak has been determined by alphabetical order by last name, and will progress from that starting point. The closing order will be determined by reverse alphabetical order by last name. Mr. Friese, will you start your first opening statement, please?
Thank you. Certainly, and thank you everyone for attending. I think one of the most important things is an informed voter. I'm certainly proud of my 2 years serving my district in the legislature. My wife and I moved here to Tucson in 2008 when I took a job as the Associate Medical Director at the University of Arizona Medical Center, and ran successfully for office in 2014. Some of the things that I'm proud of in my 2 years in the legislature are some of the bills I introduced. I actually had 2 bills become amended to Republican bills and actually pass into law. One of them was to change the public school tax credit to in 2015 to change the date. I also put together a study committee idea to look at gun violence in our state. And I'm really proud of a teacher retention program bill that I wrote and put together with our staff that would help to retain teachers in the state of Arizona by giving them a benefit of tuition reduction at our state universities. So I look forward to continuing to serve my community, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kopec.
My name is Matt Kopec, and I am running for a full term as your state representative for Legislative District 9. I was born and raised here in Tucson. I attended TUSD schools and graduated from the U of A after that. I understand and I share your values, and I want to continue to represent you in the state legislature. Prior to serving in the legislature, I was a policy aide for Councilmember Karen Ulick, and before that, I served on various boards and commissions on our community. Arizona has given me incredible opportunity, and I want to make sure that that opportunity is going to be here for the next generation that comes after. Fortunately, the legislature seems to not value these same things, and I want to make sure that Arizona respects and values all of our people, and all people can get a job, get a good education, and can make their own decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Powers Hannley.
I want to thank you all for coming tonight and not watching the baseball game. And I also want to thank the Clean Elections for putting this together. I'm running for the legislature as a progressive Democrat and a clean elections candidate because I believe far too many people in the legislature are beholden to dark money donors and big corporations and not to the people. I want to go to the legislature to fight for workers and families in Arizona. I grew up in northern Ohio in a blue-collar union household, but I moved to Arizona 35 years ago, so I've been a Tucson resident for a very long time. I've raised a family here. Between us, Jim and I have 4 adult children and 2 grandchildren. I believe that I bring a certain skill set to the legislature because I have been in medical and health communication and management and research since the 1980s. I have a master's in public health and a bachelor's in journalism, and I want to go to the legislature to be your representative and not a representative of big money. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. So now, in an attempt to lighten the mood a bit for tonight's debate, we're going to do a quick lightning round of this or that. This will allow us to get to know a little more about the candidates. Please answer with just one word. Mr. Kopec, Pandora or Spotify?
Spotify.
Ms. Powers Hannley, CNN, Fox News, or MSNBC?
MSNBC.
Thank you. Mr. Friese, Netflix or Hulu?
Netflix.
Thank you. So at this time, we will begin the first half of the debate where each candidate will answer the same question. The first question is for Ms. Powers Hannley. Are there any issues that you see where both parties can work together to improve the state?
Yes, I do. In fact, a big part of my platform is economic reform, including public banking. And this is a issue where we bring our Wall Street funds that are our rainy day funds back from Wall Street and use them here to invest on Main Street. And public banking itself and this type of economic reform to help small businesses and build infrastructure has actually been proposed as many times in the legislature by Republicans as by Democrats. And my husband and I have personally met with David Farnsworth and Mark Fincham and others on the other side of the aisle. So definitely my economic reform package to build small businesses and help entrepreneurs is a crossover issue.
Thank you. Mr. Friese.
Certainly, that is the goal of a legislature, is to have people from both sides of the aisle, people that have different opinions, to come together, focus on a problem, and solve it from different directions. I think that one of the most important things that we can focus on in Arizona is our environment. We have certain federal regulations that we need to meet. I think that coming together with water conservation is another very important issue for Arizona. Healthcare delivery. I sit on the health committee as a physician in the legislature, and I think that all these areas are areas where we need to be coming together, putting our minds together, and solving problems and negotiating and compromising.
Thank you. Mr. Kopec.
Thank you. I think one of the big issues that there is agreement on is one that I had already started working on this legislative session. I serve on the Transportation Committee, and there I started to build relationships with some of the Republicans on that committee, including the incoming chairman, or the most likely incoming chairman, because that is an issue that I know firsthand that Republicans do care about. They do understand the need for transportation infrastructure to make sure that our economy can move and ship goods as needed. So that, I think, is the most obvious area where we can work on. Arizona is lacking in that area, and that's something I think we can work together to move forward, and that's something I intend to work on this next legislative session.
Thank you. Ms. Powers-Hannley, your 30-second response.
Yes, I just want to reiterate that I agree with Mr. Kopec regarding infrastructure, and that's one of the big advantages to public banking is that states and counties can actually self-fund infrastructure projects like the I-11 corridor if we wanted to. And so it saves us a lot of money, and it is a crossover issue with Republicans and Democrats.
Thank you. Our next question, Mr. Friese. What is your position on right to die with dignity?
That is a very interesting question. We just recently had a event where the community attended and gave us some very compelling stories about that. Not every state pays attention to someone's choice in dying. When someone has a terminal illness, there is pain. We pay attention to trying to end their pain, but we don't necessarily pay attention to allowing them to end their suffering. And I believe wholeheartedly that a person with a terminal illness should be able to choose when they would like to exit with dignity, so they can say goodbye to their loved ones. I mean, if it goes on too long, people are no longer aware of what's happening. They may not be able to have a conversation. So I do believe, and there was a bill that was introduced into the House as an HCR, and there was a bill introduced in the Senate that dealt with this to give us an initial step towards a physician prescribing a medication that someone could choose to take. The unusual thing in our state is that patients with a terminal illness are allowed to choose to end their life by it's called voluntary cessation of eating and drinking. So you can choose to stop eating and drinking, but you can't choose to take a medication to end your life. And that, to me, seems rather ironic, because it continues and adds to their suffering. So it is an issue that we should be addressing in this state. This is an issue that we should be debating and having public hearings on. And in order to do that, we need our system to work properly. When a bill is introduced, it should have a hearing. And those determinations are made by the majority. And we need to make sure we're talking to our majority. Need to make sure that the majority is allowing bills like this that the people want to hear about proceed through the process. And the way we do that is by voter participation and communication with us, and working it together as a minority to make it a priority to get these bills heard.
Thank you. Mr. Kopec.
I agree with Dr. Friese. I personally have had relatives go through a painful end-of-life situation. I think that kind of decision a person can make in consultation with their family or anybody whom they choose to. I do echo I do share the frustrations that that this issue has not been debated at the full legislative level. I think this is something that deserves to have a hearing. It deserves to be discussed among the legislators and amongst the public. So, but in principle, I do agree.
Thank you. Ms. Powers-Hannley.
Well, we're all in agreement here on this one. I just recently had a situation last year with my 91-year-old mother, and for probably the last 3 months of her life, she didn't want to be in the situation she was in, but she didn't have the choice to choose to die. She wasn't eating, she was wasting away, and I think it's hard for family members to let go, but when you realize that the body is alive, but the person you knew is not there anymore, why not let them choose to take the medications to die? I totally agree with you guys.
Thank you. Mr. Friese, your 30-second response.
I think that not only are the three of us in agreement, I think the majority of Arizonans are in agreement on this issue, and the majority of Americans are in agreement on this issue. And what we need to do is, as Matt Kopec said, we need to build relationships with our colleagues across the aisle so that we respect each other, we trust each other, and once you establish those relationships, you can begin to compromise and negotiate and ask for things like, this is an important bill. The people of our state want to hear this. We need to have a public hearing so we can document what people think and where people want us to go with this issue.
Thank you. Next question. What can be done to ensure that we have paycheck fairness? Mr. Kopec.
It's interesting. When I was a small kid, my dad used to work at the mine in San Manuel, and then he retired due to safety concerns with it being a dangerous industry. And then my dad was a stay-at-home dad, and my mom was the breadwinner of our family. So I saw firsthand how paycheck inequality affects people and families. We need to have paycheck equality because it's an issue that affects all of us. It affects families. It affects communities. So I think the state should get on board with a lot of what the work that at the federal level. I know there's the Lilly Ledbetter Act. So we need to make sure that we have it. It's a priority here, and it's not just an issue that should be partisan. It shouldn't be an issue that it should be an issue we all agree on. So that's something that I think is important, and that's something we could do at a legislative level. Also, one thing we also need to make sure that we do is if cities and counties want to make sure that they have their own workplace protections, that they're able to do that. I recently signed on with a lawsuit with the UFCW as a plaintiff to make sure that if cities want to protect workers, that they're able to do that. And that's something that we can do right away, at least here in Pima County and Tucson, who have a slightly more progressive world view.
Thank you. Ms. Powers, Hannley.
Well, I believe that Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act was a good first step, but I don't know if you remember the Walmart women who sued Walmart for wage discrimination and lost. They lost because Antonin Scalia said, well, women are not protected in the Constitution, so we will not have equal pay for equal work until we pass the Equal Rights Amendment, because that's going to give us the right to sue these big employers. If the ERA had been in place when the Walmart women had sued, they would have won and not lost. And so I believe that the ERA should be proposed every year in the Arizona legislature until it gets passed. It was proposed the first time by Sandra Day O'Connor, and I want to be the last person to propose it because I think we need to get this done. We could also, if we really had the political will, we could do an ERA on the state level, and that would help women. Overall, another good step is to back raises in the minimum wage, and like Matt said, fight for these local control initiatives also as far as fair wages are concerned. So that's my plan, is the ERA, and then also raising a minimum wage and looking at wage discrimination across the board, not just for women but also for minorities and the LGBTQ community. There's lots of people who are discriminated in the workforce, and I want to help them out.
Thank you. Mr. Friese.
You know, this is a problem that's been around a long time. So just like any problem, you need to have short-term solutions and you need to have long-term solutions. So some of the short-term solutions have already been brought up, like the Ledbetter Act, federal legislation, local control issues. Short-term solutions will also be a government contract that says you must pay women the same if you're going to have government money to do your work. The tort system and judiciary involved in helping settle some of these lawsuits where disparities are uncovered and need to be corrected. Long-term solutions probably will sit in our schools. We need to educate our young children and teach them respect and equality at a very young age. So that's what they grow up with, that's what they expect for themselves, and that's what they're used to. So mentors in the classroom, teachers giving role models, acting as role models, as well as giving non-traditional roles to both boys and girls. You know, when you're assigning a role or teaching a lecture, assign a non-traditional role to the boy, assign a non-traditional role to the girl, so that they get used to not being stereotyped in a certain way. They get used to both of them seeing the world from the other side. Also, things that we can do is broad curriculum to our young kids so they find their passion. You know, if a young boy wants to be a chef, great. If a young boy wants to do a traditionally female role, support them. The same thing with young women. We need to start with our young people, getting them to respect one another and understand that there's no such thing as a traditional job for a boy or a traditional job for a girl. So long-term solutions and short-term solutions to address this problem, it's something that we need to put a lot of thought in.
Thank you. Mr. Kopec, your 30-second response.
I think the ERA is great, and I think we're about 3 states away. So it is on the cusp of something that that will finally have that change in our country. I think another thing that will also be great is come November, the hardest glass ceiling will be shattered, and I think going forward, I think a generation of all Americans will see that anybody in this country can do anything. So I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you. Our next question will start with Ms. Powers Hannley. What will you do to try to break the GOP's hold on legislative issues?
Well, I think the key, and this is something that Steve Farley says all the time, is finding the common ground, not spending all of our time, arguing about the things that we disagree on. For example, when we met with David Farnsworth about public banking, we didn't talk about choice and we didn't talk about some of that other stuff. We focused on our common ground. We focused on our ideas to foster new business and to grow the tech park and things like that in Arizona. So the key is not being completely argumentative all the time, and the key is talking about your strengths and your commonalities. It sounds simple, but I think that's the way we can do it until we can elect more Democrats and take them over.
Thank you. Mr. Friese.
Well, just like anything, when you're trying to solve a problem with a large group of people, and 90 people is a large group of people, 60 people in the House, you need to have established relationships. You need to have trust. You need to have respect. And one of the first things you need to do is make sure you communicate. Make sure your door is open. One of the first things that I worked on in my past 2 years is getting to know the people who don't necessarily think like me. I want them to know why I think the way I do, and I want to figure out why do they think the way they do. And you know what? You find out you have shared values. You really find those common places, as Pamela was referring to, and then you can start from there. I think, and I also like, and I learned this from my wife, I like to focus on things that are going well, rather than always focusing on things that are going poorly. So let's find something that we both think is going well, and let's take it a step forward. Let's move it further. And then you're going to have to, at some point, you're going to have to identify your differences, and then you're going to have to be able to figure out how can we negotiate, how can we compromise. Well, I believe that the legislative process is about bringing an idea forward, and then those 60 people either make that idea better or they make that idea more acceptable to more people. And both of those things are successes. Sometimes our Republican leadership and colleagues don't think that making something more acceptable is not the best thing because it might detract from their goal. But you can't expect a bill to be introduced and come out the other end exactly the same when you're talking about 90 smart people who have concerns of their own. So you have to find it acceptable that my bill is going to change, and it's going to change, and it's going to be better or more broadly accepted.
Thank you. Mr. Kopec.
I think for me, one of the big things to do is to get the goal of getting legislation enacted is that you do have to kind of be able to step away from the sponsor or who gets credit for it. Because I know there was a bill I co-sponsored this session, the one bill that was signed by the governor was AmeriCorps volunteers to give them in-state tuition if they spend time here in Arizona, because I think if you invest in Arizona, Arizona should in return invest in you. And that was sponsored by a Republican. That was an idea that a bunch of us, that some Democrats came up with, and we found a Republican who would carry it, who agreed with it, because that had more likely to pass. So you have to be able to come up with your ideas and work with them, but then be able to look at what's the most effective way to get something done, and that might be an example. For me, you also, like Randy said, you do have to build relationships, and you have to figure out which Republicans you can work with on the issue, depending on what that issue is, because you might not be able to work with the same person each time, but you could find out who you can work with on what specific issue. And then there are some issues that the only solution to is a Democratic majority, but because there are some issues we're just going to disagree, and then I'll be on the floor at midnight or 4 a.m. or whatever the case may be, telling the majority what my constituents think. So, but that just kind of depends on the issue. So.
Thank you. Ms. Powers-Hannley, your 30-second response.
Yes, I just wanted to add that last week I was at an event for the U of A Poetry Center, and I was starting to talk with this guy that I'd never met before, and about 10 minutes into it, we realized that we were like sort of on opposite ends of the spectrum, and I had been introduced to him as a candidate, and he asked me what politicians I liked and honored, and I said, well, I like Steve Kozachik, Richard Carmona, and Gabby Giffords, because it wasn't that I always agreed with them, but I always felt that they listened to me, and so that's what I told him. I said, look at my website. I will listen to you. You might not always agree, but I'll listen and we can talk.
Thank you. Our last question for this round, we'll start with Mr. Friese. What do you propose to improve the state economy?
That's a very important question, and I always say that I think the most important thing to do for the state to improve the economy is to support infrastructure. And what do I include in infrastructure? Well, the obvious things like roads, highways, railways, technology, not only advancing technology, but advancing access to technology, making sure that every socioeconomic class has access to the technology. And also another important thing in infrastructure is our education system, our system of our public schools. Our Constitution says that the legislature, the state, must establish and maintain a system of public education that is general and uniform. We are not maintaining our public schools in this state. We've cut them every single year since 2008. This last fiscal year, we held them harmless, and unfortunately, we said that proudly. And I'm disappointed in our saying that, because we had nearly $1 billion, $600 million in surplus monies and $400 million in the Ready-D Fund, and we were proud to say that we held our schools harmless. I'm embarrassed to be saying that in front of you. We should have been making our schools whole. And that is our goal in the next legislative session, is to make sure our schools get the money they need we need to restore and reinvest. Also, part of infrastructure is access to health care, access to quality health care. Very proud to have participated in passing kids care this year. The leadership did not want that. With about 10 moderate Republicans in the House and a handful in the Senate, we rolled the leadership and got kids care to the governor. We weren't certain if the governor would sign it, because he was hiding behind the protection of Mr. Biggs, who was holding things up all session long. So those things, supporting health care, if we make Arizona a great place to live, people will choose to move here, and corporations and small businesses will come here for the same reasons.
Thank you. Mr. Kopec.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I think education probably plays the most vital role in our economic success as a state. I mean, from any whatever rung you are at the spectrum. This year we were able to restore JTED funding that the Joint Technological Education District, which is career and technical education for our students. The legislature cut that completely last year. For what purpose, it still remains a mystery a year later. But it offered kids who, when they graduate from high school, some sort of trade degree or certification, whether it might be in a certified nurse's assistant or a plumber or carpenter or cosmology, anything, cosmetology. Sometimes you're in outer space in the legislature, but it was a group of kids who needed that training. Also, on the other end, they've cut university funding since the recession. This past year, I offered a budget amendment to restore $50 million in university funding. It was interesting when I got up and I said, I'm the first state representative who went to the university system, the U of A, during and after the recession. So I went there every year when the legislature cut funding. And I told them, hey, it's not working. The state's not getting better. We've got some of our jobs back that we lost from this recession, but the jobs that we've gotten back, on average, pay less than the jobs that have been lost. So education is absolutely key. And then some of the other things we might look at is renewing the angel investment tax credit and the R&D tax credit. That's something that we as Democrats this year, we offered. However, it failed. It's something that makes sense. It is something that previous Republican legislators have done to make sure that high-tech firms have an incentive to come here to Arizona. So there's a whole host of things we could be doing that the Republicans are not.
Thank you. Ms. Powers-Hannley.
Yes, actually, economic reform is a big part of my platform. Everything in my platform either raises money or saves money to pay for the things we want, like quality education, a solid infrastructure, and good-paying jobs. Public banking is a big part of it, but it's not the whole part. I really believe that we have suffered under the failed economic policies of trickle-down economics and austerity. So we have largesse for the 1% and austerity for the 99%. With the idea of public banking, we could, like I said before, bring all or part of our tax dollars back from Wall Street and invest it on Main Street. The angel tax credit is a good idea. I agreed with the Technology Council for that, but I said, you know what, in the long term, we could totally fund the economic startups down here in southern Arizona, and we could help small businesses with low-cost loans that are underwritten by the loans are made by our community banks and underwritten by the state funds. And then this way would be a way to have an economically sustainable system where we're bringing in a little bit of money on those loans and we're loaning it back out again. So you can see where this is a way to vastly diversify our economic base in Arizona, and particularly in southern Arizona. We're too dependent on certain industries, and our future is in technology as far as I'm concerned. Technology and the biosciences. We have a lot of smart people down here in Tucson. I always say we have all these scientists and artists and musicians and creative business people. We could be the Athens of the West instead of the dusty Pueblo if we played to our strengths and built up the local first, built up those small businesses, and built up the tech park startup businesses. And that's our future as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Mr. Friese, your 30-second response.
I just want to emphasize something that both Pam and Matt said was the research and development tax credit and the angel investor tax credit. Both of those things are highlighted by the Tech Council. Both of those things were in the Democratic platform this past budget. Both of those things were ignored. Both of those things have a huge return on investment. So you invest $1 and you get back $2, $3, $4, $5. The technology sector wants these things back. They do it. They both exist, but they just don't have any dollars allocated to them. So that is something that we quickly could address in the next budget and fiscal planning.
Thank you. At this time, we will transition to the second half of the debate, where each candidate will receive a separate question with 1 minute to respond. We're starting with Ms. Powers Hannley. Please outline your fiduciary experience that has prepared you for the budgetary oversight required of a state legislator.
Judiciary?
Fiduciary.
Oh, okay. Fiduciary. Well, I don't have a finance degree, but I have been working in research and in management for many years. I ran the Arizona Smokers Helpline for several years here when I worked at the U of A. I had a $1.5 million budget and 40 employees. I'm currently, up until January, I was managing editor of the American Journal of Medicine. So I've been in management and been writing budgets and negotiating budgets with funders and granting agencies for the last 11 years at the Journal and then another 14 years at the U of A. So I have a lot of management and budget experience.
Thank you. Next question for Mr. Kopec. What is your long-term plan for funding public education in Arizona and propelling us out of 49th in the nation for education funding?
We haven't seen a plan yet out of the Republicans. Our public school system is, depending on where you're at, it's state aid or local property taxes, and I think most of the jurisdictions have gone to the voters to get as much as they can from them with the property taxes. So the biggest thing to me is we need to stop cutting taxes to major corporations and wealthy people so we don't have budget crises every year. To me, that would make the most sense. And then going forward from there, we can look at how we can regain general fund dollars, which is where the public school dollars come from, to figure out how we can get more money into that, whether it's figuring out a different tax structure and helping our economy to get more revenues into the state. There's quite a bit we can do, but in the short term, I think we need to stop giving away money that would otherwise go to schools.
Thank you. Mr. Friese, of all health needs that need to be funded, where would you rank mental health care?
Well, mental health care is the root of many problems. It's the root of homelessness. It contributes to gun violence. It contributes to homelessness. It contributes to chronic healthcare issues. So we should be focusing on getting access to healthcare and mental health care specifically to our Arizonans. And the best way to do that probably would be through our public health system, our community health systems, supporting the different healthcare providers at multiple levels, nurse practitioners, physician extenders. So yes, I think this is a big problem that has probably percolated and gotten bigger since the mid-'80s, when we had a lot of closure of our chronic health care, mental health facilities. Actually, those probably weren't the best way to manage the problem either, but now that these people are out on the streets and chronically homeless and unable to be employed, it is contributing to a significant problem. So I would say that it is a high priority.
Thank you. Ms. Powers Hannley, what is your position on legalizing marijuana?
I actually agree with the legalization of marijuana. I believe that there are economic and humanitarian reasons to do such. As far as the humanitarian reasons, there was a study by Harvard Medical School just a couple years ago that said that states that had medical marijuana for 5 years or more had a 25% decrease rate of death from opiate overdose. And Arizona has an opiate overdose problem. So there's humanitarian reasons that way. There's also been multiple articles, including in the journal where I work, that talks about the medical benefits of marijuana. And it's expensive to get a medical marijuana card. And so if it was legalized, more patients could try it. As far as economic reasons, I think that we have to look at the mass incarceration issue. Too many people are being jailed and arrested and put into jail for a plant that never killed anybody. I think we should stop that. That's a waste of money, you know. And then also it's discriminatory. Usually if you're a black or brown person or a man, you're far more likely to be stuck in jail for pot. So yes, I think it should be legalized.
Thank you. Next question for Mr. Kopec. Where do you stand on the legislator allowing school vouchers to be used for parochial schools without concern of the division of church and state?
It is concerning. The whole, in addition to just parochial schools, the whole problem with vouchers is pretty stark, because what you're doing is you're taking away money from our schools, our district school system, and giving it to private institutions while you're leaving the schools, the district schools, out to dry, because a lot of private institutions or charter institutions are able to screen process for folks that are admitted. So a lot of times district schools are left with folks who might have disabilities, and that kind of program, it costs more. So you're really starving the system that creates a great equality in our nation, because I think if everybody has access to good quality public education, then we'll all do better. So you're creating two systems, that are separate and unequal. So it's very concerning to me, and that's something that we saw some of that this year with the voucher bill. We were able to kill it, but it might come back again.
Thank you. Mr. Friese, what is your plan to get more funding for education?
Well, I think a plan for education needs to be multifaceted, and it needs to be probably over several years. And unfortunately, the way we're managing our plan for education right now is just 1 year at a time. So I think what we need to do is, now that Proposition 123 has passed and some money is coming into our schools, I think we need to look very closely at three very important things. First, we must renew Prop 301, and we probably need to raise it to a full penny. Right now it's at 0.6. Prop 301 tax monies goes to education, pays our teachers, pays for money in the classroom. We need to I believe we need to revise the state land trust payments. 6.9% per year is too much. It stresses our state land trust. I think we should be revising our land trust to pay more in times of economic downturns, so that when the general fund is stressed, and pay less in robust economic times when our general fund is more stable, and then it reinvests in itself. So I think there are states that have plans like that. We can be smart and think outside the box and protect our land trust fund with a revision like that.
Thank you. Next question, Ms. Powers Hannley. Can the state legislature do anything to seriously address climate change? If so, exactly what can you do in the legislation?
Well, I think that I believe that global warming is real, and we should stop denying it, and I think that there are macro and micro things that we could do regarding global warming and climate change. I think that we need to monitor our water and our air quality. We need to try to lessen our dependence on fossil fuels. When I met with TEP and APS a few weeks ago, I worked in the electric utility industry way back in the dark ages of the early 1980s, and I talked to them about how many plants they have that are coal-fired and how many plants they have that are gas-fired and where the gas is coming from and about the fracking and things like that. So I think that we have to look at the EPA's clean power plan, and this is another unnecessary lawsuit. We're suing the feds over this. I believe that we do need to gradually shut down those coal-fired plants. I think on the micro level for people in their homes, we should be promoting rooftop solar instead of trying to cut it. We should be promoting water harvesting and other sorts of environmental. I got the stop sign, so I got to go.
Thank you. Mr. Kopec, name an instance where you have personally influenced legislation that became law.
Well, the first comes to mind is the bill that I had co-sponsored that's now law, the in-state tuition for AmeriCorps. Folks who did AmeriCorps in Arizona can now get in-state tuition at our universities. Some of the biggest one this year was kids care. That was something that all of us Democrats had never given up on while the legislation itself had been drafted. That's something that a fight that our caucus and myself we never gave up on. We voted on it 3 times. One is a bill, one is an amendment to the budget, and then one is an amendment to another bill. So. You gotta be able to stick with it sometimes, especially on something so important, because now upwards of 31,000 kids now have access to health insurance. So, sometimes you just have to keep fighting and not let something that's important go. So.
Thank you. Mr. Friese, if elected, you will be a member of the minority party. How will you effectively influence legislation from this weakened position?
Well, I think when you come into it with a disadvantage like that, you can't let it stop you, and that's one thing that I certainly didn't even pay much attention to, because I introduced a lot of bills, both sessions, and a couple of my bills got amended to Republican bills and got passed into law. I also, as I said before, established relationships. I established relationships by getting to know people on a personal level, trying to understand how they think, and letting them know why I think the things I do, why I support these certain positions. And I think over time, that's what really pays off, is when you're able to say, we worked together on this issue before, let's now take on a bigger issue. And in fact, I had a program at the beginning of this session where we had a bipartisan, about 11 or 12 of us came together, and it was a National Institute for Civil Discourse taught us a course. And I invited everyone to attend. Had to stop.
Thank you. Ms. Powers Hannley, how do you think pro-choice legislators can parlay the recent Supreme Court decision on Texas abortion clinics into increased services for Arizona women?
Well, I was really excited about that Supreme Court decision yesterday, and I saw the maps that were in the New York Times, and there are many states like Arizona who have the same laws that were just struck down. I read in the paper that Katie Hobbs is going to, propose a bill that we come in compliance. I'm not sure, how much traction that's going to get. But I really do think we need to try to talk to people about maybe saving money and not going to court over something like this, and just agreeing that those laws don't work. They actually, if you want to, reduce the number of surgical abortions, you should make the morning after pill more readily available. You should make contraception more readily available and cheaper, and you should have medically accurate sex ed. So there are ways to reduce the number of surgical abortions without tinkering with how wide the hallways are and whether or not the doctors have, admitting privilege to some hospital and all those other crazy laws we keep passing. So there are other ways to accomplish their goal without those laws. So,
thank you. Mr. Kopec, there is no racial diversity among the LD9 candidates. 1/5 of the district is Hispanic. How will you represent the interests of this community?
Well, I've been serving in this community all my life. Before I was appointed, I worked for the city of Tucson, and there's a lot of overlap between Ward 3 and LD9, and that's actually some of the overlap between Ward 3 and LD9 has some of the most stressed parts of our district. So that's something I had been in neighborhood meetings regularly. So I had kind of in tune with what was going on the ground. I do understand, how the makeup of the district, but as a great part of the state is younger. Like I said, I was the only representative who went to university here while the legislative budget cuts were happening. I'm currently the youngest member of the state legislature, so I think that there's a perspective that's important for people who live here, people who are in school now who want to live here and continue to live here, and that's a view that I represent. So I think that perspective is of value.
Thank you. Next question for Mr. Friese. Regarding new school funding, please name the annual budget number that would optimally fund K through 12 through post-secondary schools.
Wow, that's a trick question. I'll say the root cause of the problem in Arizona right now is that we have underfunded our schools for so long, and we have not yet begun to reinvest and restore. So any number that gives the schools, and I'm talking about every public school in this state, the opportunity to reinvest in itself, buy new equipment, upgrade their technology, pay their teachers appropriately, decrease their class size. These things are what's important. These things are what we should be focusing on when we fund our schools on an incremental level. As I said earlier, I think we need a multi-year plan for funding our schools because we have defunded them for so long. So that number is a hard number to put my finger on, and we know right now it can't be more than 49% of the general fund because 123 just passed, and now that limitation's in place. So that number, I would say, is any number that allows our public schools to restore and reinvest in themselves. And that number certainly isn't a number where we're holding schools harmless. That number schools need more money.
Thank you. Ms. Powers-Hannley, how would you get rid of the Wall Street influence at the state legislature?
I've actually looked at some of the campaign finance contributions at the legislature to see who was getting money from Wall Street and who might not like my ideas for getting rid of Wall Street. But it's hard. I mean, you have to look at the campaign finance. You have to really try to pull back some of this dark money that's flooding, like, for example, getting rid of SB 1516, which we're trying to put into a citizen's veto. The more they allow dark money to go in, the more Wall Street influence and corporate influence we're going to have. Going back to the public banking idea, I still think that that's a good idea as far as, lessening the influence on Wall Street on our lives, because if we, for example, the state of Vermont has a slogan, 10% for us. So why not use 10% of our rainy day funds and invest it in infrastructure and things like that? And the more that states and cities chip away at the money that's out there on Wall Street and bring it back home, that's going to reduce Wall Street's influence nationwide, really.
Thank you. Mr. Kopec, how do you plan to assure that there is a step 2 after the passage of Prop 123?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's incredibly important. That's something that our entire caucus has been working on, holding the governor accountable. I know one of the journalists on the Weekly, he has a countdown clock fairly regularly to say that days waiting until the governor comes up with a step 2. It definitely has to be something because, like Randy said earlier, the legislative Republicans left $1 billion on the table when it comes to education funding. And not only that, but 123 did create a fiscal cliff in 10 years. We're taking too much money out of the permanent fund as it is. So we not only do we have to fix the mistakes that have already happened, we have to make sure that there's going to be money there for education. And I think what I said earlier is step 1 for me is making sure that we're not just throwing away money that would otherwise go to education with our tax policy, and then looking at how we can redo kind of the whole system to make sure that there's fairness, and then also make sure that we have a growing economy that will continue to fund the education institutions in our state.
Thank you, Mr. Friese. What would you do to improve dependents' health care coverage and costs for Arizona State Retirement System retirees' families? What about cost of living adjustments for ASRS pensions?
Well, healthcare is certainly a large part of the budget as well. Healthcare and education are two big parts of the budget. I think we need to think smartly about healthcare delivery. Part of that will be using our physician extenders, our nurse practitioners, our physician assistants in the rural areas where there aren't as many physicians, and making sure that they are allowed to practice at the fullest extent of their education. Another part of that will be, one of the things that I'm a physician, and I'm very, very much aware of the value of prevention. And it's sometimes hard to get government to understand the value of prevention. A dollar saved here is many more not spent over here. And I think we need to focus, we need to get our universities, our medical schools, we have good medical schools in this state, to start helping us understand how can we provide public policy based on prevention and providing access to health care, home health, maybe private-public partnerships to get health in the home now rather than always inpatient.
Thank you. Ms. Powers Hannley, what unique skill or ability most qualifies you for this position?
Well, I think that it's a combination of my background in communication and public relations with my background in management. For many years, I have a bachelor's in journalism from Ohio State. I have a master's in public health from the U of A. And so I worked most of my career in public relations and corporate communications. For example, like I said, I worked for an electric utility company. I've worked for the Arizona Cancer Center. I've been a small business owner. I've had a lot of experiences in my life, but I've always been a communicator and a good writer and a good listener. Like I said before, when I was talking to that guy at the Poetry Center, it's like you won't always agree with me, but we can have a dialogue, and you'll know that I put a lot of thought into my decisions, and I'm going to communicate why I voted a certain way, and I'm going to bring voters into the discussion. So I think it's my background in communication.
Thank you. Mr. Kopec, have you given any thought for standardizing or restricting the control of homeowners associations?
I do live in one. I have a condo complex. We have to make certain that when a homeowners association does something, that it's fair with enough notice and folks can be engaged. Because I know that sometimes it happens with mine is that there's multiple different or a few major companies might purchase multiple properties and then essentially control the board. So we have to make sure that we keep the folks who actually have to live there, that they are a part of the process. And that's something that I think is important. That is, because sometimes it's great. Hey, they trimmed the tree or they cut the grass, but then I've got some sort of fine all of a sudden for something being out of place. So it is a balancing act, but we have to make sure that the folks, even if they rent, are able to have some sort of say in the process, because you have to live with the consequences.
Thank you. Our last question of the evening, Mr. Friese. What are your thoughts about renewable energy, solar, wind, hydro generation in Arizona?
Well, that's a great point. I mean, Arizona should be one of the solar capitals of the country. I believe that we can reduce our carbon footprint with alternative energy sources. I think that we should be incentivizing advancement in technologies for these alternative sources. I think that when we participate as a partner with corporations and companies that have innovative ideas, we will reap the benefits in the end. There are certainly federal regulations that we need to abide by for our air quality that are particularly important for Arizona, because we do have some significant coal-fired plants still in place here. We need to take pay careful attention to the investments that have been made in those facilities as we transition to smarter, safer, greener sources.
Thank you. Now we will begin the closing remarks. The first closing statement will be given by Ms. Powers Hannley.
Again, I wanted to thank you all for coming tonight. I'd encourage you to go look at my website, powersforthepeople.net, to learn more about my campaign and my ideas. I wanted to reiterate the idea that everything in my platform either raises money or saves money to pay for things that we want, like quality education, a solid infrastructure, and good paying jobs. I also believe that we need to diversify our economic base with growing the tech startups and helping small local businesses. I totally support the idea of Arizona First. And so I think that I would be a good legislator. I have a lot of background and bring a lot of variety of experiences to the job, and I hope I have your support in August. And again, powersforthepeople.net, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Kopec.
Thank you all for coming. I think this has been a great discussion. I want to go back to the legislature to build upon the experience that I've already gained. Experience both over this last legislative session, but over my experience working with the city of Tucson and other capacities in my community. Our campaign has the support of the Tucson Mayor and Council, many of my legislative colleagues, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the United Food and Commercial Workers, the Fraternal Order of Police, and the Arizona Education Association. And every day while I've been out knocking on doors, talking to voters about what issues are most important to them, every time I have a renewed sense of confidence in Arizona. Folks want to make sure that their future is better and the future for their children is better. And I think together we can make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Friese.
Well, thank you again for coming, and thank you for what I've learned in my 2 years in the legislature. I've gained the respect of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. I'm an active debater. I participate in the discussions on the floor. I ask a lot of questions. I know the rules, and I know how to use them. I've used them to our advantage. And I will continue to work with Republicans that I have respect for, and they have respect for me. And I think that's a huge advantage starting off on day one. And I just want to quickly review some of the things I'm proud of that I did in the past 2 years. I've introduced a bill to address public safety and gun violence prevention. Everyone else is afraid to address this topic. I have introduced bills about background checks. I have introduced 6 STO reform bills. STOs are student tuition organizations that take money from the general fund and put them in private schools. I have put together an experienced teacher retention pilot program to keep our experienced teachers here in Arizona by allowing them to attend one of our state universities for reduced tuition. And if they stay here for 10 years, their entire family would get to attend an Arizona state school for reduced tuition. That will not only keep them here, but their children here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming, candidates. We appreciate that. And to all of you, thank you for your questions, and thank you for taking the time to come and inform yourselves before voting. We encourage you to visit www.azcleanelections.gov, where you can find information on the upcoming elections. You can download the Clean Elections app and learn more about the candidates that are running for office. A link to this video the video of this debate will be on the Clean Elections website, posted within 72 hours of scheduled debates. Please fill out the debate evaluation form you received when you entered this evening and hand it to our volunteers before you leave. Your feedback is very important to the Commission, and it'll help improve future debates. Thank you all for coming tonight, and you are welcome to stay and speak directly with the candidates.